everyone, and welcome to the World of Wrestling podcast. I'm Slim. Carl's not back yet, obviously. Uh, I've talked to him. He says that he's got no idea when he'll be back, but it's soon. I'm hoping that he'll be back for the Extreme Rules recap. If not, I'm thinking definitely by SummerSlam. Um, was sort of thinking maybe it could be like a cool return sort of thing where he comes back for SummerSlam. It's like a big sort of, whatever. But who knows. However, this week I do have a special surprise. We'll get to that at the end, after 205 Live. But we will start this off with Backlash. And when we start with Backlash, we've got to start with the kickoff show, which was a United States Championship match between Andrade with Zelina Vega and Angel Garza versus Apollo Crews with Kevin Owens. Owens was on commentary. It was a pretty good match. During the match, Garza tried to get involved and Owens attacked him, which stopped him. Crews won by pinfall after hitting the toss powerbomb. Main show then started with the women's tag title match, which was Bliss and Cross versus the Iconics versus Bayley and Sasha. Before Bayley and Sasha's entrance, they got an interview. They say that they're going to win. The interview continues after Sasha goes out to do her entrance with Bayley. She pretty much says that they're going to win again. It was a pretty good match. Bayley and Banks won by pinfall after Bliss hit Twisted Bliss on Peyton, and then Banks got Bliss in a nice pin to get the 3. Yeah, it was pretty good. It wasn't anything great, we'll get to that. But, to kick the off, it wasn't bad. Lana is backstage. Well, MVP's actually backstage, and Lana shows up to talk to him. And he says that he didn't tell Lashley to make her stay in the back, but since she has, he has been coming out with Lashley. Lashley is having the run of his career, so maybe she needs to talk to Lashley about their marriage. After that, we get Sheamus versus Jeff Hardy. Good match. Sheamus won by pinfall after hitting a brogue kick on Jeff for the 3 count. Miz and Morrison then got interviewed, and they were told that whoever scores the pin or submission on Braun will become the Universal Champion. Otis also shows up and says he may cash in on whoever wins. Then we get the Raw Women's Championship match between Asuka and Nia. Decent match. Neither woman won after they both got counted out. Which is shit. Because that means that we've got to have another Nia and Asuka match. So, yeah. We then get Braun defending his Universal title against Miz and Morrison. Hey ho, ho ho. Pretty good match. Miz and Morrison looked like they might win toward the end and even hit their tag finisher. And as Morrison went to pin Braun, Miz pulled him off before putting him back on top of Braun. Braun won by pinfall after hitting the power slam on Morrison. We then get the WWE Championship match between Drew McIntyre and Bobby Lashley with MVP. Pretty good match. During the match, Lana came down, which distracted Lashley, and he eventually got knocked into her, who landed on top of MVP, and Drew won by pinfall after hitting the Claymore. Like I said, it was a pretty good match. We then are meant to get the Raw Tag Title match between Profits and Raiders, but instead we have a cinematic brawl that started backstage. Shit just went crazy. It's worth watching because of how batshit crazy it is. Tozawa showed up with ninjas. It was just crazy. Go and watch it. It was fun. But now it's time for the main event. and it's the greatest wrestling match ever between Edge and Orton. Was it the greatest match ever? No. But it was a really, really good match. Yeah, really, really good. Best match that they could have put on. Even in their prime, I don't think they could have beaten this match. Yeah, lots of legend moves, like the rock bottom and shit like that. They did some sequences from great matches as well. And in the end, Orton won by pinfall after hitting the punt kick. The show was worth watching. Um, yeah, it was probably one of the best that they've put on all year. Besides maybe the Rumble, because although all shows that they put on this year have been actually pretty good. But yeah, I think that this one probably second to the Rumble. Yeah. But we'll move on to Raw, and the show starts with Randy Orton coming out. He says that he humiliated and embarrassed and wrote the final chapter in Edge's career. Randy says he won the greatest wrestling match ever, so that makes him the greatest wrestler ever, and he doesn't need a title to prove it. And once again, he is the legend killer. He says Edge will be cleared in July of 2029, so he might see him again in 9 years. Christian comes out, calls Orton a son of a bitch, says Edge will get his closure when he comes back. Orton says Christian is jealous and Christian wants one more match. Christian denies it and Orton says although Christian isn't cleared to compete, there's a way around that. So how about we have Christian versus Randy Orton unsanctioned? And that offer expires by the end of the night, and if Christian doesn't accept, he is a coward. We then have an interview with Angel Garza and Zelina Vega. Before the interview, we see what happened at Backlash in the US title match. Vega says that there is no arguments going on. Garza says he was just trying to help Andrade. They both then talk about Garza facing Owens later, and Andrade shows up and wishes Garza good luck. We then get Angel Garza with Zelina Vega and Andrade versus Kevin Owens. During the match, Vega walks out after both Garza and Andrade grab her. Owens wins by pinfall after hitting a stunner. Post-match, Vega comes back down and tells them to stop fighting each other and start working together. Then we have a recap of the WWE title match at Backlash. Then backstage, MVP and Lashley get interviewed. MVP has a go at the interviewer for interrupting them. Lashley says that they are in the middle of a strategic conversation. MVP also says that Lashley was cheated out of the title by Lana, but he doesn't say it, although it's implied. He also says that they are going to address that right now. MVP and Lashley then come out and they say that Lashley was cheated out of the title. MVP says Drew has no integrity because if he did, he would have given Lashley another shot on the spot. Lana then comes out and says she does everything for Lashley and it all went wrong when MVP showed up. Lashley says it's Lana's fault that he lost. Lashley says that she uses their sex life to get more famous, and she says that if that was the case, she would have slept with Drew. Lashley then says he wants a divorce. Then we have a look at the Profits Raiders rivalry, including what happened at Backlash. Then we get an interview with the Profits and Raiders. They say that they had to come together to fight a common enemy. Tozawa shows up and says sequel, and the Profits say he ain't going to be in the sequel, but they will all throw down at any time. We then get Viking Profits versus Tozawa and 3 of his ninjas. I think that could have just been 4 ninjas and Tozawa's on the outside. I don't know. I really don't know. Big Ninja was also on the outside because he's got a big ninja. Viking Profits win by pinfall after the cash out. Squash match, obviously. Post match, Tozawa and the Big Ninja get in the ring, and Viking Profits call out Big Show, who takes out all the small ninjas, and Tozawa and the Big Ninja leave. Rollins then has a backstage interview, who says that he's happy that Dominic is here. Christian is then backstage, and he doesn't know what he's going to do. Rollins then comes out without his disciples. Rollins says that last week he invited Ray to come to Raw this week so he could have a conversation with him, but Ray declined the invitation. However, Dominic accepted. Ray shows up on the Tron and says that he didn't know Dominic was coming to Raw until it's too late. Rollins asks Ray to tell Dominic to join him. Ray says that won't happen. Rollins says if Dominic doesn't join him, then he's a part of the problem. Ray says if Rollins, Murphy or Theory touch Dominic, then he will end them. Rollins continues to say that Dominic can make his own decisions when Dominic attacks Rollins from behind. Murphy and Theory come out, but Dominic avoids them and gets away. R-Truth show up to where MVP and Lashley is and says he feels sorry for Lashley because he got sent to Claymore Country and he doesn't even know where the hell that is. Then he's got to get a divorce. That's a raw deal. Lashley then threatens Truth, who leaves. Ninjas try to get Truth, and he goes under the ring, comes back out where Lashley and MVP are. And as they're about to beating up, Drew McIntyre shows up. MVP says, why don't Drew and Truth put their titles on the line in a tag match? Truth accepts, then Drew accepts. After that, we get Liv Morgan and Natalya versus the Iconics. Decent match that went about 2 minutes long. Iconics won by pinfall after they hit Fall from Grace on Liv, which is why it was decent, because Natalya did next to nothing. Post-match, the Iconics challenge Bayley and Banks for a match right now for the women's tag titles. Bayley and Banks don't come out. The Iconics say they will talk to somebody and get the match made for next week. Christian is backstage when Big Show shows up and says that he has 2 options, either turn down Orton or shut him up. Christian says he knows what to do. Backstage, Natalya and Liv are arguing, sort of. It's more Natalya's one-sided. She's just having a go at Liv for losing, and Liv walks away. Natalya says that she built the division only to be humiliated, and Lana says she put everything into a relationship for Lashley because Lana was just there apparently. She put everything in a relationship with Lashley, got humiliated and a divorce out of it, and Natalya says she understands. Christian stands on stage and says if Orton wants to give him one more match, then he accepts. Apollo is backstage and MVP shows up and congratulates him and says that he doesn't want Cruz to burn out and lose his title, and MVP can make sure that doesn't happen. Cruz declines and MVP says the only way Cruz will keep his belt is with MVP in his corner. Then Rick and Charlotte are backstage and Rick asks who gets under Charlotte's skin, and she says lots of people. Cruz is out next to verse Shelton Benjamin. During Shelton's entrance, we get a promo that he did earlier where he says Cruz should take MVP up on his offer, but after Shelton wins tonight, then Cruz will need all the help he can to keep the title. It was a decent match. Cruz won with a roller and hooked his arm around the rope to cheat for the win, which was, surprising, because Cruz shouldn't be doing that, but hopefully that means that maybe Shelton gets to do something, because Shelton's really good. But Truth is then backstage when Cesaro and his ninjas show up, and Truth tries to do ninja shit. The ninjas leave when Drew shows up. Drew says that Truth needs to understand that they could lose everything. Truth says he understands and he knows what to do. Then we get a look at the rivalry between Asuka and Nia, including the match at Backlash. Then a backstage interview with Asuka. She talks in Japanese before saying Nia started the fight and she will finish it. Truth then says that only Drew's title is on the line. Truth also tells Drew to trust it. Profits and Raiders then thank Show for helping them with the ninjas. Show says he's really enjoyed the Viking Profits rivalry, but it will end next week on Raw, when Profits defend their titles against the Raiders. We then get Lashley and MVP versus Drew and Truth for the WWE title. Pretty good match. Drew and Truth won by pinfall after Truth reversed the spear on the outside with a drop toe hold, sending Lashley face first into the steel steps. Drew then hit a Claymore on MVP and tagged in Truth with a splash for a 3 count. Ric Flair is backstage talking to Christian and says Christian isn't ready for this match and tries to talk Christian out of it. Sasha and Bayley show up and they talk about retaining the belts. Bayley says it's her birthday and they're going to celebrate all week. Iconics interrupt, have a go at Bayley and Sasha, then Sasha gets slapped and Bayley accepts the Iconics challenge for next week, which hopefully means they're going to lose the belts to the Iconics. And that should further on the story because Bayley's accepted the challenge. I'm hoping. We then have a look at what happened earlier with Rollins and Dominic. Then we get Nia versus Asuka for the Raw Women's title. And I've got sneeze. Oh, shit. During Nia's entrance, we see a promo she recorded earlier saying that Asuka got lucky and at Backlash. She got lucky at Backlash and she's going to take the title tonight. Decent match. Asuka won by pinfall with a roll-up after Nia pushed the ref and as he went to call for a DQ, Asuka rolled up Nia. The ref fast counted to give Asuka the win. And hopefully that means it's the end of that feud. I would say it would seem like it. But we've got a Raw Women's title match on Raw this week against Charlotte, which is also another match I don't want to see. And I just get the feeling Nia's going to interfere in it. And then at Extreme Rules, we get like a Extreme Rules triple threat match for the belts, and then Asuka's going to retain, and then after that, like Rousey and Baszler come out or something. I don't know. That's probably the best case solution to it. I don't know. Orton has a backstage interview where he asks Charlie if she thinks Christian is a legend. She says yes. He says he does too. He then asks if she knows what unsanctioned means, and then he proceeds to answer his own question in saying that it means no rules, and in a few short minutes the legend of Christian will be destroyed by the 3 most destructive letters in WWE. RKO. Main event time, and it's the unsanctioned match between Orton and Christian. We've got about 2 minutes left at this point. During the introductions, Ric Flair comes out and tells Christian not to do this. Christian says he needs to do this. The bell rings. Flair hits a low blow. He hits a low blow on Christian, and Orton punts him and wins by pinfall straight away. Post-match, Orton says he's sorry, but it was all Christian's fault. We'll move on to AEW Dark, and this week's Dark has 11 matches. The first match is Sin and Money, Capital Vices, right? The 2 people are called Sin and Money. The team is called Capital Vices, just to clarify. And they really, really, like Freddy Krueger. They've dressed up as him, and it was weird and funny and weird. They're teaming with John Cruise to verse Jurassic Express. It was a good match. Jurassic Express win by pinfall after hitting the extinction level event on Cruise, and Jungle Boy picked up the pin. Next is Brandon Cutler and Peter Avalon with Leva Bates versus SCU, and it's Frankie Kazarian and Christopher Daniels. Pretty good match. SCU won after they hit the Celebrity Rehab on Avalon. CD got the pin. After that, we get Danny Jordan versus Big Swole. Squash match. Swole won by pinfall after hitting the Dirty Dancing. Then a backstage interview with Leva Bates, and she says she has a plan. Cutler says no more plans. They don't work. Cutler and Avalon then say they don't want to team together, and they both go their separate ways. We then get David Ali versus Lance Archer with Jake Roberts. Video editor gets attacked during Archer's entrance. I know that because they said so on commentary. It was a squash match. Lance won after hitting the blackout, then the EBD claw head slams. Post-match, Archer hits a choke slam on Ali. Up next is Musa and Sean Dean versus Joey Janela and Sonny Kiss. During the match, Archer comes back out and Roberts has to talk him down. Decent match. Janela and Kiss win by pinfall after Janela hits a top rope hurricanrana and Kiss hits the splitting splash on Musa for the 3. We then have Ali and Brandy Rhodes with Dustin and QT Marshall versus Red Velvet and Kenzie Page. During the match, Ali tweaks her ankle, which puts her out until the end of the match. Ali and Brandy won by pinfall after Ali got the blind tag and pinned Page by putting her foot on her for the 3 after Brandy speared her. Post-match, Brandy and Ali argue and Brandy pushes Ali. Match was decent. Then we get Lee Johnson versus Sean Spears with Tully Blanchard. Good match. Spears won by submission after locking in the sharpshooter. It is then Brody Pierce and John Skyler versus Dark Order, Eva Luna and Stu Grayson, that is, with 3, 4, 5, and 10 on the ramp. Good match. Dark Order win by pinfall after they hit the fatality and Uno pinned Skyler for 3. Post-match, Brody Lee comes out clapping to show he approves of the match. Then we have Griff Garrison versus Jimmy Havoc. Good match. Havoc won by pinfall after hitting the Acid Rainmaker and officially DDT for the 3 count. The next match is Skylar Moore versus Penelope Ford with Kip Sabian and Oscar, which is their dog. Decent match. Ford won by pinfall after hitting the Fisherman Suplex with the bridge for the 3. Main event time, and it's Robert Anthony versus Scorpio Sky. Pretty good match. Sky won by pinfall after hitting the TKO. We'll move on to AEW Dynamite, and during the show, Britt keeps sending notes to Tony Schiavone on commentary. There's a little pulley system that she just attaches notes to. Dynamite starts with the AEW Tag Team Championship match of Hangman and Omega defending against the Natural Nightmares with Brandy. Ali comes down during the match to cheer on QT. Pretty good match. Hangman and Omega won by pinfall after hitting the last call on QT. Next is a video package for Anna Jay before we get Anna Jay versus Abaddon, which was a squash match for Abaddon, who won by pinfall after hitting a kneeling hurricanrana for a 3 count. Post-match, Dark Order come out and help Anna Jay up and to the back. Grayson and Luna also give an envelope to Colt Cabana. It's revealed later on that in the envelope is a match where I believe it's Colt and Mr. Brody Lee versus Sonny Kiss and Joey Janela off the top of my head. After that, we get MJF with Wardlow versus Billy with Austin and Colton Gunn. Multiple times during the match, MJF taunts Jungle Boy, and MJF also leaves before. Oh, yeah, that's right. He left the match, and then Billy went and got him and brought him back like a little kid over his shoulder. Wardlow gets involved in the match and gives MJF the Dynamite Dozen ring, which MJF uses to get 3 count. It was a good, fun match, very funny. Post-match, MJF and Jungle Boy brawl while Luchasaurus and Marko Stunt brawl with Wardlow. Yeah, like I said, it was a very funny match because MJF would do things and it just wouldn't affect Billy. We then get a backstage interview with Les Ex-Gods and Floyd. They say they juiced Orange last week because he interrupted the Inner Circle twice. They also say that they will beat the Best Friends later because they want tag titles. Next, we are meant to have an interview with Britt Baker, but since Tony was talking about Hikaru Shida versus Penelope Ford at Fyter Fest, he is now in a lot of shit and has lost the interview. Britt then tells Reba to get her out of there when it's revealed Swole is behind the wheel of the Rolls Royce and parodies the Where To Teddy by The Undertaker. Cody and Arn Anderson are out next to reveal who Cody is versing, which is revealed to be Ricky Starks. Before the match, Cody says he's lonely because last week when he and Hager were brawling, no members of the Elite or Nightmare family, not Natural. Arn says that he has found the perfect opponent for Cody, Ricky Starks, and as a package before coming out for the TNT title match. Hager is watching backstage too. Pretty good match. Cody won by pinfall after hitting the Crossroads. Post-match, we get a handshake from Cody and Starks. We then get the Superbad Squad with Penelope Ford versus the Gun Bucks. Multiple times during the match, the Bucks taunt Butcher and Blade, which allows Havoc to use a wet floor sign on Matt Jackson. Very funny. FTR came out to keep Butcher and Blade under control. Havoc brings in a mallet in which distracts the ref so we don't see Ford hitting Nick with the wet floor sign. Again, funny because it's a wet floor sign. You don't think of a wet floor sign as a weapon. Pretty good match. Bucks win after a double Kamigoye on Kip Sabian for 3. Post-match, Butcher and Blade and FTR get in the ring. All 4 teams brawl until FTR and the Bucks stand tall. Taz then explains what happened last week when Cage and Mox brawled in the parking lot. Cage says he will destroy Mox at Fyter Fest, and matter of fact, he wishes Fyter Fest was right now. Mox then has a video package where he hypes his match with Cage pretty much. Commentary then run down next week's and the Fyter Fest card. Then we see Reba running around looking for Britt Baker. She's found in a dumpster. Britt fires, then rehires Reba. Britt then says that Swole will pay for kidnapping and dumping her in the dumpster. Main event time, and it's Les Ex-Gods with Floyd versus Best Friends with the number 1 contendership for the tag titles on the line. Unkillable Matt Hardy is on commentary. During the match, Jericho uses Floyd behind the referee's back on Trent. Guevara uses Floyd on Trent towards the end of the match, but couldn't get Trent away. And Trent hit the belly to back pile driver for the 3 count on Guevara after he was tripped by the cameraman. Post-match, it's revealed that the cameraman was Orange Cassidy. Orange and Jericho brawl until Orange stands tall after hitting a Superman punch on Jericho, who flew out of the ring. We get the wide-angle Best Friends hug as the closing shot of Dynamite. Move on to NXT now, and this week's NXT starts with a recap of what happened last week. Then the first match of the night is Imperium, Bartel and Eichner, defending the NXT tag titles against Breezango. Breezango came out as Bartel and Eichner, but it had a remixed version of Imperium's entrance music. They had a changed version of their Tron, and they weren't called Marcel Bartel and Fabian Eichner. They were called something else. Towards the end of the match, Indus Sher come down and Bertrand Morgan attacked them and they brawl. Eichner DDT's Fandango and gets a 3 count to retain. It was a pretty good match. Dream starts talking and Lumis gives him a picture of them holding the tag titles. Dream says he returned the favour and Dream is a solo act, which I hope means that Lumis will turn on him eventually. We then see Priest walking into the building and Grimes is in the background. We then get Damian Priest versus Killian Dane. Pretty good match. Priest won by pinfall after hitting the reckoning. During the break, Dane hits the plexiglass where Robert Stone was leaning against and knocks him to the floor. We then get Xia Li versus Aaliyah. During Aaliyah's entrance, she goes and gets Stone and brings him to ringside. Toward the end of the match, Stone spews in the ring, which distracts Xia and Aaliyah wins by pinfall with a roller. It was an okay match. It wasn't even decent, it was just okay. We then get training with Timothy Thatcher. Then Hero give Robbie therapy. The doc they send him to as Kyle O'Reilly. We then get a backstage interview with Adam Cole, who says that Scarlett and Cross were trying to scare him last week, but he will beat Cross. Keith Lee shows up and says Cross won't take the title from Cole, it will be him. Cole's out next and he says nobody deserves a shot at his title. He says Cross has a long way to go until he earns a shot. He says that maybe he has got his eyes on Keith Lee's North American title. So maybe he wants 2 belts. Lee comes out afterwards and says, and before he can say anything, Gargano comes out and he says that he beat Keith Lee last week, so he wants another shot at the North American title, but he also wants the NXT title. Lee and Gargano talk about what happened last week when Balor comes out and says that he still needs to win the North American title. Balor then says that he will take the North American title, and when he does, he's coming after the NXT title. Regal appears on the Tron and says next week Keith Lee defends his title against Balor and Gargano. Winner of that will face Cole in a winner takes all match on the July 8th or 9th here in Australia episode of NXT, which also happens to be night 2 of Fyter Fest. And I'm somewhat hoping that whoever wins that winner takes all match then has to verse Cross and they just lose it to him. Keith Lee then has an interview that is interrupted by Candice, who is attacked by Mia Yim, and they brawl backstage. Caden Carter is out next with Casey Catanzaro to take on Dakota Kai with Raquel Gonzalez. Decent match, Kai won by submission with a reverse Rings of Saturn. Scarlett is backstage and plays with the sand of a broken hourglass. Cross steps on some of the broken glass. That got broken during that backstage segment with Keith Lee and Adam Cole. We then get Bronson Reed and Leon Ruff, versus Leon Ruff, I should say. Squash match, Reed won by pinfall after hitting the top rope splash for the 3 count. Match lasted about 30 seconds. Post match, Reed calls out Cross for a match next week. Reed also carries Ruff out. In the parking lot, Priest sees that his car's tyres have been slashed. Cameron Grimes rolls up and asks if Priest wants an Uber before driving off. Santos Escobar, Raul Mendoza and Joaquin Wilder out next. Santos says that he is the leader of leaders and together with Mendoza and Wild they will create a legacy. Maverick comes out and attacks Santos, but the numbers game catches up to him. Santos then hits a Phantom Driver through a table and stands over Maverick, holding the Cruiserweight title high. It is shown after the break that Maverick was taken out on a stretcher and put in an ambulance, as Jake Atlas is looking on. Main event time, and it's Sasha Banks and Bayley defending the women's tag titles against Shotzi Blackheart and Tegan Knox. Good match. Bayley and Banks retained by submission after Shotzi taps out to the Banks statement. Post-match, Io comes down and cleans house, taking out both Bayley and Banks. Commentary runs down next week's card, taking the show. We're on the NXT UK, and this week's NXT UK features Tyler Bate, Pete Dunne, and other NXT UK superstars and coaches talking about the NXT UK title match at NXT TakeOver Chicago. Moving on to SmackDown, and it starts with a recap of the finals of the IC Championship tournament from last week. We then kick the show off with commentary running down the card before we get the Intercontinental title presentation for Styles. A majority of the SmackDown roster surrounds the ring for the presentation. Styles says that he's an accolade machine and he wants everyone around the ring so that they're as close to the title as they will get. AJ makes Bryan present the title to him. Styles keeps telling Bryan to do it and antagonising him until he does. Bryan also congratulates AJ because that was another thing AJ wanted him to do. Bryan then gets on the mic and says that AJ could be the greatest Intercontinental champ if he defends the title against everyone. AJ says no. Bryan says Gulak has earned a shot since he pinned AJ. AJ says no, and if anyone else says anything, then they will have to deal with the consequences, and Matt Riddle comes out. AJ has a go at Riddle, and Riddle says that he's here to give some advice. Since AJ is the face that runs the place, he's the bro that runs the show. AJ then attacks Riddle. Riddle fights back, sends AJ out of the ring, and AJ asks for a ref. We then get AJ Styles versus Matt Riddle. During introductions, AJ cuts off the announcer when he goes to say that the title is on the line. Everyone who was around the ring for the presentation is still around the ring for the match. During the match, Styles kicks Riddle in the Corbin, and he and Riddle argue. Toward the end of the match, AJ pushes Bryan, who was giving Riddle advice on the outside after he'd been hit into the ropes. He had gotten to the ropes, not hit. He'd gotten to the ropes after being knocked in the calf crusher. It was a good match. Riddle won by hitting the Bro Derek and getting the pin from that. Jeff Hardy has a sit-down interview next where he is asked how he is holding up. Jeff says he's good but struggling. Jeff says if he thinks that Jeff says he thinks that he could beat the shit out of Sheamus. It would prove to himself how good he is if he did that. But by losing, it's making him question if he's good enough anymore. Jeff says Sheamus has a problem with himself, not Jeff, and that he isn't finished yet. Shorty G has an interview where he says he doesn't care about the height and weight disadvantage, and he's got his eyes in the back of his head. And he punches Mojo in the face because he was standing behind him. We then get Shorty G versus Mojo Rawley. Decent match. Shorty G won by pinfall with a roll-up. Miz TV next with Mandy Rose. Before they invite Mandy out, they talk about Backlash, where they say they lost because Miz lost focus and they changed the rule. Backstage, the rules got changed, making it so that whoever picked up the win would be the champion at Backlash. Mandy is then introduced. Miz and Morrison talk to Mandy about Sonya. and they insult Mandy. So as she leaves, Miz says they have a surprise for her, and it's Sonya. Sonya keeps talking about how Mandy keeps stealing the spotlight. Sonya says she's going to rip Mandy apart piece by piece before they brawl. Sonya gets out of the ring by using Miz as a shield. Mandy slaps Miz before leaving. Bayley and Sasha are out next to join commentary for New Day vs Lucha House Party. Nakamura and Cesaro are looking on backstage. It was a good match. New Day won by pinfall after hitting the midnight hour on Dorado. Post-match, New Day are attacked by Cesaro and Nakamura. They tell commentary that they're sick of being overlooked and disrespected. That's commentary being Cole and Graves. Dana Brooke, Tamina, Naomi, Alexa Bliss and Lacey Evans are backstage talking about Sasha and Bayley when Bliss realises that Nikki Cross is missing. We then have a backstage interview with Sheamus, who says that watching the interview with Jeff made him realise that things have gotten serious between the two, and Jeff said he's bully, and he's damn right. Next week, Sheamus says that he's going to toast Jeff Hardy. Bayley and Sasha are still on commentary when Cross attacks and challenges Banks to a match right now, which happens to be our main event, which is Nikki Cross with Alexa Bliss versus Sasha Banks with Bayley. Good match. Banks wins by pinfall after hitting the Meteora and hooks the leg to get the 3 count. The show ends with the Firefly Funhouse. Bray says he's done so much over the past few weeks. Rambling Rabbit says he was sitting in the corner thinking about losing the brawl, which Bray got a little bit upset by, but didn't kill the rabbit, just got upset. Braun interrupts the Funhouse. Braun says Bray has had his opportunity and failed, but Bray laughs it off, walks back into the old cult leader Bray, who tells Braun that he knows where to find him and all he needs to do is follow the buzzards before saying run and blowing up the lantern. Which I somewhat hope means that at Extreme Rules we get Cult Leader Bray versus Braun wins, and then at SummerSlam we get Fiend versus Braun, and Fiend wins. But we'll move on to 205 Live, and before we talk about 205 Live, Jack Gallagher has been released. I believe that he got released during SmackDown, so they didn't have much time to change anything on 205 Live, which is why he still appeared in the show's intro, and he still has a match later. But the show starts with Oney Lorcan and Danny Burch versus Everrise. Although I did say that wrong. That's Oney Lorcan with Danny Burch versus Chase Parker with Matt Martell. Decent match. Lorcan won by pinfall after hitting the blockbuster. Post-match, Malcolm Bivens comes out and Everrise attacks the Britain Brawlers. Indus-Share then comes out and destroys the Britain Brawlers. We then get the Santos Escobar promo package before seeing what happened on NXT with Escobar and Maverick. Main event time, and it's Jake Atlas vs Jack Gallagher. This is going to be the last time we see Gallagher on WWE TV until they bring him back, if they bring him back. Good match. Atlas won by pinfall after hitting the Rainbow DDT. Now is the surprise that I teased at the start of the podcast, in that I'm going to be doing the New Japan Cup. Going to cover that. I haven't watched the matches, so yeah, because I don't have that much time to sit there and watch that. But I'll just give a rundown of who's won the matches and whatnot. So this week we've had 8 matches, which are Togi Makabe defeating Yota Tsuji, Tomohiro Ishii defeating El Desperado, Toru Yano defeating Jado, Hiromu Takahashi defeating Tomoaki Honma, Kazuchika Okada defeating Gato, Yuji Nagata defeating Minoru Suzuki, which was a surprise. I thought Suzuki would have gone far, but knocked out in the first round. Yoshinobu Kanemaru defeating Yuya Uemura, and Taiji Ishimori defeating Gabriel Kidd. Which, we've still got another 8 matches, which will take place tomorrow and Tuesday, which obviously I'll cover next week on the podcast. Plus, I'm not 100% sure, but I will take a look. I'm not sure if we get like the next round starting this week or next week. Round 2 starts April 23rd. Oh no, that's the wrong one. Oops. Starts June 24th, so yeah. June 24th and July 1st is when they're going to be on, which, if I take a look, means that half of round 2 will be covered next week, and the other half will be covered the week after. And then the quarterfinals, semi-finals will also be covered in 2 weeks' time. And then the week after will be the finals, which will also be covered in the same one that Dominion's covered in, which we will have predictions up for on the day before, because that's when the New Japan Cup finishes. But other than that, I think that's all that I've got to talk about. So we will have predictions out at some point next week for Fighter Fest. Fighter Fest it takes place on the 1st and 8th, so it'll be Friday, Saturday or Sunday next week that we get the predictions out for it. Obviously it probably won't be Sunday because I've got to record the podcast, obviously. So it'll probably be Friday or Saturday. I'm not sure yet. I will talk to Joe. But we've got Fighter Fest ones, which will be soon. Then we've got Dominion, which we'll do on the 11th. Then we've got Impact that we'll do at some point during that week. And then we've also got Extreme Rules, which will be done that week as well. So you'll get 3 predictions videos in 1 week. Yeah. 3 in 1 week, so that'll be lucky. Haven't talked to anyone about being in the Extreme Rules one yet, but I will get to that, but it's not for another 3 weeks or so I'm not worried. It'll just be me and Joe for the Fighter Fest, Dominion and Impact ones, and then so Extreme Rules. I'm hoping that I can get some other people other than Seth and Kobe, but I'm not sure. It might be Fat Boy and Asian once again. Maybe I can get a few others. I don't know, but I will talk to everybody about that in the coming weeks. So other than that, thank you for watching, and goodbye, good night.